everybody. Uh, First off, I have a mosquito bite here, so if I look like kind of slightly weird today, it's because my eyelid's a bit swollen. So I look like I'm like, this week I am, my sermon prep involved, what did it involve? It involved getting a second dose of the vaccine, having some unusual reaction, ending up in ER, having my crazy old aunt from Ontario drive all the way out here and trigger some of my old childhood trauma, and then hosting my brother and his family with a 2 and a 5-year-old. So it has been a very full, intense week, and I am feeling very like the very clay vessel today. I just telling you this because why am I telling you this? Because I'm self-confessing and by nature probably, but also I really am not here to be the talking head and but yeah, I'm throwing myself on the mercy of God today. I don't feel like the fine clay pot that could hold beautiful flowers. I feel like the pinch pot that the 2-year-old made and handed to grandma, and she's like, oh. So yeah, this story today, it's kind of essentially we're talking about authority of Christ, authority of Jesus. What gave Jesus authority? And that's a question I've actually wondered a lot because, and just what does it mean that, we've never heard anyone speak like this? What would it have been like to see and hear Jesus in the flesh? And how did he speak that so many people were gripped? They were compelled, and just what kind of, I think Jesus had probably kind of a vibe, right? He would have, just like every person has a feeling about them, he would have had a feeling about him. And I've often wondered, what was that feeling that Jesus had at that time? And because we know charismatic people, actors or different people who compel our listening, and so what was Jesus like, and what was his actual authority, which of course was a question that everybody who heard Jesus kind of had to answer for themselves. So yeah, we have the situation is we have the priests they are and the learned, they are the studied and the scholars, they are leaders culturally and religiously. They have a lot of power and a lot of control and a lot of authority. Even though they're under Roman occupation, they are still the cultural and religious authority in the Israelites' lives. And the soldiers are sent to arrest Jesus, and the soldiers would have been like, theoretically like you or I, right? Just the average Joe who has a job as a temple guard. And, I am assuming that they were, potentially people with families, that they needed that pay, that they were supporting families and their lives, their livelihood was that job. And they go against the cultural, religious, the top authorities, in lieu of, they choose instead of obeying the temple priests, which of course would have probably meant they lost their jobs, they lost their livelihood, they lost how to feed their children, and they get ridiculed. So potentially they lost their status in that place, in the synagogue and in that culture and life. And they choose instead to listen to something inside themselves. They choose something is awakened when they hear Jesus. Something resonates in them, and they choose that voice inside. And yeah, so we don't know what happens to them, but probably a fair guess that they may have lost their jobs right then and there. They're not going to do what they're told. Then we need new temple guards. And let me just find my note here. So this is not the first time, well, many times through the Gospels we hear that Jesus has this kind of effect on people. When he was 12 in the temple, he's speaking with teachers and scribes and rabbis and priests, and they're amazed at his understanding. They're amazed at his wisdom, and this gets kind of repeated quite a few times. This idea of like we've never heard someone speak like this, and surely like. You go, we know what authority, we have the same thing in our culture. We have authorities, we have experts, people that we, be expert witnesses that'll testify in court because they've learned this one aspect of their, some particular aspect of life or their work, and they can testify on these things. Or you go to university and there's a prof, and the prof has spent their whole life studying Shakespeare, and they're the, authority on these topics. You have Bonnie Henry, doctors, people who spent their lives to, learn about the pandemics and disease and illness, and can speak to people, and people respect their opinions. And we still have this system of experts and authorities everywhere: lawyers, doctors, teachers, all kinds of things, pastors and theologians. But the unique thing about Jesus is that, of course, he's not a scholar. He's not, he does get called rabbi, but probably not from having, he was trained to be a carpenter, not trained. He wasn't a Levite. He wasn't being trained in the priestly ways or anything like that. And so that's what's amazing. He's not like scribes or priests, rabbis. He's just the average person. He's the average Joe or Jane, speaking like he has authority, as if someone who has studied or and this is, and it's even surpasses what people have heard in the synagogue. Someone speaking from the pulpit in the synagogue, they're like, it's not even like the priests who do have the learning and the study. Jesus is unique. He's just the average guy who speaks beyond their authority. So what gives Jesus this compelling speech, this compelling authority? And this is something that gets questioned and witnessed to all the time through his life, right? He has the authority to forgive sins. He demonstrates he's got authority over demons and spirits. He's got authority over the enemy of God and the power of the enemy. He has authority over illness, sickness. He heals. He has authority over nature. He curses a fig tree that's not fruiting, stills waves. He has authority over death. He raises to life. He has, and he says he has authority, that all things were given to him by the Father. He has essentially authority over all the heavens and the earth. So the heavens, of course, doesn't mean heaven, the place. The heavens means, in that time, meant the cosmos, the firmament, the stars, everything beyond. It was the heavens were where the gods lived. So things that came from the heavens were heavenly. They had sort of God. And he has authority over earth, everything created and seen, made by God, including all people. So Jesus has a ton of authority, but he's in an ordinary package. And so then you get this questioning. But is the is the Messiah supposed to come from Galilee? No, 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 he's not coming from Galilee. They search their scriptures, they, or how is he doing these things? Oh, he can cast out demons because he's Satan, and he's got power over demons. So all the time there's these questions to his authority by the people who have power and authority, because of course, when one of the most delicious human feelings, of course, is power and control over other people. And that's one of his temptations in the desert, right? Jesus was tempted like we are to take his power and authority and use it over others. And that's a real temptation that we always live with. I mean, as parents, we have authority and power over our children. How do we exercise that power and authority in marriages and relationships? We have power and authority over one another. How do we exercise that? Jesus has this another little interaction, not in this passage that we're doing today, but about sort of where they say, like, so they question, where do you get this authority? Why are you allowed to testify and witness to these things of God? And he says to them, like Jesus, he throws out a question. He says, well, where was John the Baptist from? Where does Jesus, he says, tell me, was he of heavenly origin or human origin? And of course, the religious leaders don't want to answer either. They see themselves dealing with a problem or loss of authority and their own power and control with either answer. But the people, interestingly, all the average Joes, the people who don't have so much to lose, they're able to recognize all these things he's doing: stilling waves, healing, forgiving sins, the way he speaks. They so clearly recognize this is heavenly origin. And so that makes all the difference, right? It's where is the source of what, how we move? Are we moving from heavenly origin or human origin? What's interesting, of course, is that's a binary understanding. There's heavenly origin or human origin. And Jesus' whole life is a little like overturn of just a binary system. And we still see that, right? We love to say that's good, that's bad. This is hell, this is heaven, this is good, this is evil, this is God, and this is us, and we still sort of see things in that way. But I think that the whole living life of Jesus, his whole being, of course, was an expression of the third way or the middle way. It's not heavenly origin, it's not purely earthly origin. Jesus, of course, is God and man, God and human together. And so he's introducing in his own body a third way. Just no one's quite recognizing it yet. And maybe we haven't recognized just how thoroughly Jesus really means that message, that to be flesh, to be matter, to be something that's living and breathing on this earth means to be matter is to be indwelt with spirit. We are never just earthly or just heavenly. We are the combo of the two. That's what it means that Christ gives his life to us, is that we are that amazing. And that's why we look so beautiful and amazing to God, because we are a mirror of what Jesus was. We are human combined with, and that's what the whole story of God is about. That reality itself, love itself, is two as one all the time. So it's not one or the other, it's the two as one. And that's our whole life, is waking up to how deep that reality actually is, how wide that reality actually is, how spacious. And so what does give Jesus authority? What gives him, and he's quite explicit in John. He says, well, Gordy actually gave this recently as the definition of sanity, not insanity, sanity. We'll see if this is the definition of insanity. That Jesus has three things. He knows who he is. He says in John, I am. So he's saying, who Moses met? I am. He's saying I am the same as God. He says he knows where he's going and where he's come from. So who you are, where do you come from? Where are you going? I think that Jesus knows those answers. How does he know those answers? Because he studied Torah, or because he grew up, in a Israeli culture and understood the ways of God, or as Mary and Joseph managed to teach, who he was and who he is and where he's going and where he's coming from. No, I think those are questions that Jesus answers by being with the Father. His own personal, as Jesus the man, Jesus birthed in the flesh, walking on the earth, he had the same choice we do, which is to live with spirit or to live without spirit. And Jesus, like a human, felt that call, that longing, that soul desire that echoes in us. If we're open to that, that's always in us, this longing, this aching that points to God. And he didn't fill it with other things. He didn't fill it with addictions. He didn't fill it with false identity. Jesus just answered that. He heard that call in his being, in his actual flesh. And he heard those answers. He saw those answers reflected back to him by the Father. And I think that those are questions that we need to answer too. Like, who am I? Like Tay said, with God's glasses. Where have I come from? And where am I going? I think those are answers that you need, that we need too. We need those in our being, and we need them to be conscious. They're in there because I think the Spirit is the answer in those questions, and that Spirit's in us. But I think those need to be conscious for us. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? God has answers for those questions. And they're found in the relating with God. They're found in the being. And so we know too, Jesus later says in John again, so he has these answers. He has this knowing. So the knowing he hasn't studied it. He's learned it. Like it says, he learned obedience. Obedience means to hearken. It means to listen. That's what obedience is. It's listening to the Spirit. And everything with God, it doesn't get translated well into English because we read about God always working, or he's always doing this. Jesus says, I do what the Father does. I say what the Father says. But if you look actually at the Greek and the understandings of these things, not to hammer you with Greek stuff, but there is something really lost in English. We have this binary that we our division of mind and body. So we have this idea that there's things that we think and there's things that we do, and we have being, but being is separate from doing. Jesus, and I don't think that's actually the biblical understanding of a person, for one, or what God is. God is actually always in the Greek is this sense of that God's being and doing is the same. So God is active being, if that makes sense. God is active being. So it's not that God chooses to do stuff. It's the being of God is alive and active. Just like how a plant is always active. It's not moving around, but it's always doing something. right? We can't see always the something. It's putting out roots, it's storing energy for the winter, it's making a bud, it's making fruit. Just like a plant is always actively being a plant, it's actually manifesting in a tangible workings, but it's not I go to work and then I stop working, right? So that's how the Father can be said to be always working, because he's actually always actively being. And even God's will, that word will is actually means God's desire or pleasure, but God's active desire. God's active desire. God has not just a desire that sits there pining. His desire is acting always. It's always, the universe is always being ordered by God's desire and pleasure. So Jesus is basically mirroring. He's not like he's sort of getting secret messages and he waits and goes, okay, blah, 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 right? It just feels like that would not be that'd be a mechanical way of the Messiah acting. I think that he has this really conscious ears and sight to the being of the active being of the Father. So what he does is he says, I see the Father being like this. I hear the Father being like this. And so he bees like that too. So he's being what is echoing, what is being witnessed, and that he's attentive to. He's attentive. The hearkening isn't it? It's not just listening, it's an attentive listening. And the very listening causes the being that displays itself in actions that look like the Father. So he's always heavenly. They can be recognized as of godly origin. And the people are able to see that. The people who want to hold on to power and control, who want to hold on to a religion that boxes people and enslaves people, those are the ones who can't see it. Very similar today. I think in sense too that our false parts of ourselves, they can't recognize parts of ourselves. And Jesus says this. He says that people who are seeking to be one with the desire of God, the active desire and the active being with God, he says those are the people who will be able to recognize me. They'll be able to recognize this because they'll have it in themselves, and like will recognize like. They'll be able to say, I know that because that's in me. I see that love because I know that love here inside me. So that's what Jesus lives and moves from. Jesus is the one person that's all true self, no false self. And that gives him just this amazing freedom to submit, because that true self knows they're one with the Father. The true self knows that there is nothing that separates us from God. The true self knows that it's glorious and beautiful and divine. And so it has perfect trust, that true self. And that true self is in all of us. And that is the peace that Jesus in the Trinity the Spirit holds and guards and hovers over and feeds and nurtures. And it's just our job to try to relinquish as much as we can that false bit, so we can just be at one with the thing that's already in there. Yeah, what do I want to say now? Just give me a minute. So Jesus is not doing anything on his own because he moves in that being. The eyes to see and ears to hear. Jesus is demonstrating what that looks like, to have eyes and ears to hear and see. It's a life that's unprotected. It doesn't have to defend itself. It doesn't have to because it lives in trust. The Father's always there caring. And so another thing, the Father, Jesus says this in John 2, that the Father raises the dead. That what love is death transformed into life. Love is the broken made whole. Love is prisoner set free. And so Jesus, he understands. I love that sometimes he says to, when he's arguing, or the scribes and priests, temple priests are trying to argue with him, and he talks to them and he says, your scriptures say this, your scriptures say that. Somehow he separates himself from whatever it is they're doing. And even though he would have been raised on those same scriptures, he has perceived that the law was insufficient and it needed its finishing, its completing, so that love could be really freed, and the spirit could be freed. So this is going to seem like a bit of a shift, but I felt like God say, I felt like God toss out this little idea to me. He's like, hey, you're talking about this. What about if you threw this idea into that? What if you put those two ideas side by side? And I was like, kind of collaged those two ideas in my head. And I was like, that is really good. when God has these, he can see it all. And when he can connect those two things in your own little head, it's like, whoa, cool thought. So we know that Jesus is the way, he's the truth. He's the way and the truth, because what he is he's living out he doesn't just copy God. I hope that's what's been clear here. He's not copying God. And it's not just that he is God. He's being what a human is to be. He's being the way for us. He's being the truth for us. He's being as God in the world. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're Christ in the world. So he's saying there is no just a human, and there is no just God, in fact, almost. God, even himself, doesn't just identify really ever on his own. We don't know of, like, in the beginning is potentially not the beginning. It's the beginning for us. Is it the beginning for God? I don't think so, right? God is being itself. He existed from before. So, yeah. So we have this idea of you hear this idea now of people saying, my truth, my truth. We've got this cancel culture. There's so many ideologies, so many groups that are all worthy groups arguing for this and for that, and recognize this and recognize that, and see us and see this group. And, everyone, there's this idea that there's no more truth anymore, that we've come into an era of relativity. And that truth is not even something to be pursuing or expected. I recently told the truth on a really, really minor thing. I bought a face mask at a shop and it got a hole in it because my son chews on seams. It had a seam down the middle. And I grabbed this mask running out the door. I was by the shop and I wanted to go in some other places, and it was like a month or two ago, and I had this hole in it. I'm like, well, a mask with a hole right in front of the mouth isn't going to work. So I went into the store and said, this one's got a hole, I need a new one. And she said, oh, is that because we made an inferior product? Like they were going to just give me a new mask. And I said, oh, no. It wasn't your sewing. It was my 12-year-old son who chews on seams. And the lady thanked me like, oh, and the mask was worth, I don't know, like $5. And she's like, oh, well, thank you for being truthful about that. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. But it was like, to me, like, it was $5. Like, why would I can give you $5. It's worth that. It's been hand sewn by somebody. Like, but she was really like, you told the truth. People don't even expect the truth anymore, right? And I think we think that maybe people won't even necessarily respond or recognize the truth. But that's really not the case. And Gordy showed us this great video of Nightbird. I don't know if you guys saw that. If you haven't, then look that up on the internet. Nightbird, her singing at America's Got Talent. I think that's what that show is called. And she's a Christian struggling with grief from living with cancer and a 2% chance of living, and a husband who left her in the middle of that. And she sung her story. She sung her grief and her own encouragement, her own speaking to her own soul, like a psalm. She sang a psalm essentially, but of her own writing. And they said, how can you be, this happy when all these terrible things are happening to you, and you might not even live, and you're young? And she said, well, I've decided just to not wait to be happy, but to just choose to live basically life now. And people were like silenced by that. And I saw her interviewed by some American channel, and this, news announcer guy who's used to news and blah, blah, blah. And he called out that one word because he heard truth. She's saying, I just choose to live for life now, even if it's not all good. I can't wait for everything to be better. I can't wait for everything to be good, to choose to just be happy, or maybe not happy because she's a Christian. She looks like she knows more than just happy. She looks like, I'm going to choose to live for God, even if I'm going to die tomorrow. And I'm going to make that a real thing. And she sang her story. So she sang her truth. I think probably every Christian or any person who hears my truth or my truth probably thinks, I've always felt a bit uncomfortable with that. And I felt like God highlighted to me that what people are really longing for is their own voices. We are longing to share who we are and where we've come from and where we're going. And that when we're saying my truth, maybe it's the wrong words, in that it's not the truth, and it's not like their truth is more true than my truth or whatever, even though it's become that. Of course, people are arguing whose truth is more valuable. But I think people are saying we've lived under a structure of, institutions and patriarchy, and where there's so many experts, and people are saying, but my voice matters too. I think that's what people are saying when they are wanting people to hear their truth. What they're saying is, my voice matters, my story matters too. And of course, that's essentially like John's writing that when he writes the gospel. He's saying, I have a story, here it matters. And I'm writing about somebody who says, yes, you're right. Your voice and your story matter. They all are a piece of a puzzle, and God's this puzzle. And I do have some truth that you don't have about God. Why? Because I see a different God, or because God is different, but because not because like that I have something special knowledge of God. What I have, each of us has, you have, every single person has. We each have, it's like a marriage, right? There's Matt and there's me, and then there's the Matt me. There's something that's created there that has a feeling and a dynamic and a whole way of being that's not just Matt, it's not just me. And it'd be hard to pull those apart. It'd be hard to say, well, that's like at this point, like, is that the Matt part? Is that the me part? Because they become one, right? So you and the Spirit have a marriage. And that is like a unique puzzle piece. And if you don't share your truth or your marriage with the Spirit, that's a puzzle piece that's missing in the world. And the world might not know that piece is missing, but you'll know it's missing, and God will know it's missing. And so I think what we're tired of is experts. But I want to suggest that each of us is an expert. And that's what Jesus was living out. He's saying, yeah, I'm an expert. I'm an expert at the relationship I have with the Father. Not something he created in his head, not something he learned about. He lived a relationship with the Father. And he said, I'm an expert on that. And I'm going to tell you about it. And so I want to suggest that your life, with your sorrows, with your joys, with your flaws, with the parts of you that you're like, bang, 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 why is that still existing? I want to do this thing and I'm not doing that thing, just like Paul says. Or I want to be this person, but I'm not that person. What if just the person you are right now, with the story you have right now, with all of its holes and weird places and things, bits you don't understand, or why did that happen, or why did I do that thing, or how did I end up here? What if that story is your expertise, your perfect piece that's made to be part of the whole puzzle? And what happens if you keep that piece and you don't ever share that piece? What happens if there's just all these holes in this puzzle? So I want to share a video right now that basically illustrates what I'm talking about, because it's words are one thing, seeing it is another. So this little video that Tay's going to show us is it's a rehearsal, a song rehearsal for if you've seen the movie The Greatest Showman with Hugh Jackman, about P.T. Barnum and the circus, the creation of the circus, back when the circus was, not tricks necessarily, or, acrobatics like the cirque or whatever, but like freaks, when, the fat bearded lady and the midget and the this and the that, when people came to see weirdos and freaks and things that scared them and that attracted them and disturbed them. And so this movie's about, this song is about when the sort of the freaks say, hey, we're not just freaks, we're people like you. We're not just holes, we're people like you. We're not just wounds, we're not just broken, we're people like you. And so I don't have the lyrics in it in the video so that you can see. So I'm just going to read a little bit the lyrics. But so in this rehearsal, there's a woman, it's called This Is Me. The song is called This Is Me. And there's a woman who sings the song in the movie. And so they're practicing. And I want you to notice her face at the start and her face at the end of the song. And the lyrics of the song, which you can mostly make out when she sings, but she does get a little sad. So it's, I'm not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, because we don't want your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say. No one will love you as you are. But I won't let them break me down to dust. I know there's a place for us, for we are glorious. When the sharpest words want to cut me down, I'm going to send a flood. I'm going to drown them out. I am brave. I am bruised. I am who I am meant to be. This is me. Look out, because here I come, and I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me. Another round of bullets hits my skin. Will fire away, because today I won't let this shame sink in. We are bursting through the barricades and reaching for the sun. We are warriors. Yeah, that's what we've become. That's what we've become. I won't let them break me down to dust. I know there's a place for us, for we are glorious. So that's the words. And yeah, enjoy this video. Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say how many times I've actually watched this. It moves me to tears every time. I hope you saw in the start that woman's face she's hiding. And even she says in the beginning video, I clipped it out, that she was terrified to sing that song. It's her story. She was terrified to sing it because she felt the shame, and you can see it in her face. She said she was hiding behind the music stand, hoping that music stand would just kind of hide her out. And they said, you can't be in the movie like that. You got to sing it. You can't be singing it from fear in the movie. It won't work. And she was terrified. She was terrified to just really enter into that story, because of course her story is shame and it has scars and they're not gone. Just like Jesus was raised with scars and holes. They don't go away. That's not the message. The message is the both and. The message is brave and bruised. It's together. And then at the end, I don't know if you guys see in her face, she's just like, this is me. Like, and there's a little bit of delight there in the her. And it's not a proud delight. It's the Father's delight. That's what I see there. That whole video to me screams someone living into their story and the power of one person not being afraid to share their story, not being afraid to be that story, that it's okay that your story isn't perfect. Jesus' story on paper wasn't perfect either, right? Came from a mom who should have been cast out, should have been stoned. He was poor, he was average, he was boring, dare I say. There wasn't anything particularly special about Jesus. As a person, he was special because he just said, no false self, just true self before the Father. I'm safe in that. It's where I'm found. And he trusted to live from that. But he didn't do it alone. Jesus said, I do nothing on my own. And he assembled friends, and not just the 12. He was with people all the time, women who paid and supported his living, people who housed him. Jesus didn't do anything by himself. You can see in that video, the room is subdued. And when she decides to kind of step out and she looks to the other faces, there's a bit of a question. Like, am I allowed to do this? Will you guys let me just be me here? And what do? They just rise up. Everyone, like that guy on the piano, is just pounding those keys. Everyone is so into it. They're like, you, be you. But you is not just you, and my truth doesn't exist. My story doesn't exist. It's actually our story. I've been feeling like God challenged me. I feel protective over my story because some of it makes me look like crap. Makes me look like a real jerk. Some of it is so exposing. And I've been feeling God's challenge to say, but your story is not your story. It's everyone's story. It's a story for everyone. It's your stories for everyone. Each of us is an expert in the bit that we have of God, and each of us needs to hear the other bits of God because it helps us to live our story. That to me is how the gospel spreads and how the body functions. We work and we are glorious together. We are living our stories together. Don't bother trying to do anything by yourself. I'm like, why do I bother trying to do anything by myself? What a waste of time. Why am I bothering? Jesus never expected to do anything by himself. So if you're feeling like your personal salvation project isn't working and you're not getting to God fast enough, or you still got crap to deal with, it's because you're by yourself. That's what the law was. It was personal salvation project. Here, jump all of these hoops. You can't do it. Well, that's the point. The point is it's together. Since the beginning, Jesus, it's been 2 is 1, 2 is 1, 2 is 1. We are the ones that can come as one to join with Christ. And like, let's be the community that helps everyone to sing their story, whether they're Christians or not. God is big enough and is in all people. He's in all flesh, singing in their souls. Their lives are teaching them something about God. They may not recognize it. They may not call it God, but it's the Spirit. The Spirit is everywhere. So if we can see the Spirit in ourselves, you can see where you're the expert, the authority. You may be able to sing it out and someone else will see it. They'll recognize it. They'll say, I have seen that. It's in me too. So my question for us this morning is, I really want you to get conscious about what your story is. Who are you? Where are you going? Where did you come from? What bit of your story that no one else has? What marriage of that, in this marriage of the Spirit in you, what do you know that exists there that you could live out, that you could share, that you could sing, you could dance out for the world to see? I want you to get conscious of what that is. You know, I think when the Bible says be prepared to give your answer, that's the answer. It's not doctrinal statements. It's, I've experienced someone who loves me and I love them too. And that love makes something that's beautiful and glorious. So that's my question is, what's your story? What's your story? What do you have that is something only you've got to give, that we need, that you need?
Yeah, and not to be ashamed if we don't have it.
Yeah. So when we do breakout rooms, and it was a bit of a really open-ended question, but maybe you could just, I mean, and this is something we can do with each other. We can help each other see, like Tay said, we can't always see we can't see the whole picture by ourselves. We need other people to say, hey, I see this in you. I know this about you.